Hello and welcome to Double Dipping, Harnessing Dual Librarian Roles to Create Experiential Learning Opportunities. My name is Autumn Johnson and I am a Special Collections and Research Services Librarian at Georgia Southern University. This presentation will showcase how I worked collaboratively with my liaison faculty to design a scaffolded, hands-on experiential learning project for undergraduates in a digital humanities course using library work. To give a little background about my institution, Georgia Southern University is a public doctoral and research institution located on 3 campuses in Statesboro, Savannah, and Hinesville. The university library is composed of 2 on-campus branch libraries on the Statesboro and Savannah campuses. Approximately 18 librarians provide regular instruction services, including face-to-face instruction, and the creation of asynchronous tools such as LibGuides and other web-based tools. During the 2018-19 academic year, our team of librarians hosted approximately 250 face-to-face classes and workshops. Of these, a majority were one-shot information literacy sessions. Many of the research services librarians here are tasked with instructional activities, but also wear other hats and will often have oversight of another area, including scholarly communications, government information, open educational resources, and in my case, special collections. And as a special collections librarians with responsibilities as a library liaison to history, art, theater, foreign languages, and digital humanities, I often work closely with my faculty to develop library instruction that targets student information learning. While I most often encounter students early in their program of study and research methods courses, my dual role has afforded me additional opportunities for student engagement through things such as participation in internship fairs, research symposia, and major advisement events. Increased awareness of both the liaison program and special collections has grown as a result, and increasingly my faculty are more willing to incorporate the library's special collections materials into the curriculum when appropriate. And these types of special collections instructional sessions have also evolved from traditional show and tell sessions and one-shot sessions to those that offer more meaningful hands-on experiential learning. And as far as the background between the library and digital humanities, I really do stand on the shoulders of giants with my efforts with digital humanities. Prior to my arrival in 2018, my colleagues were approached by faculty in this area with help needing a dedicated portal to host instructional materials, student portfolios, and projects related to digital humanities initiatives and the minor. These portfolios needed to accommodate audio, 3D printing, digital mapping, data visualization, which were really not well supported by our institution's LMS. So my colleagues worked collaboratively with the faculty to host student portfolios and projects using our LibGuides CMS. And I highly recommend reading the article I have posted here, Let the Rights Ones In, Supporting Patrons as Content Creators, for further reading about that early relationship. Now, the Digital Humanities program itself is a minor offered on campus, and it offers undergraduates a chance to really hone their skills and create projects in the humanities and liberal arts that have an explicitly digital component. Over the years, the student work has centered around projects that bridge these areas, and they've included historical games, web design, ArcGIS, and however, many of these projects centered around fictitious but real-world scenarios. In my slide here, you see a student portfolio describing a prototype for a possible museum kiosk that would serve as a display mat with descriptions for an interactive exhibit. So great work, but again, fictitious. So with that background, my journey to the Digital Humanities program really began in fall of 2019 when the Digital Humanities faculty member approached me as their new liaison. They hoped I could give an overview of the library's rare book collection. And our rare book collection is modest, but we do have early printed books and a single 15th century handwritten manuscript. And the faculty hoped that I could make a connection between the history of the printed book and their disciplinary fields in a more meaningful way, highlighting the transition of information between physical objects and digital platforms. He also hoped that I could give a student an overview of the different tools that students can use to strategically explore these sources. So in these early meetings, I saw an opportunity to kind of cash in on my dual roles as both an instructional and special collections librarian, and really push the faculty to perhaps consider the work of librarians as digital humanities work. Could it be possible to use the work of the library, specifically special collections, to provide students with a real world experience? I was very fortunate because the faculty was receptive of this idea and using library work and our early modern book collection as an option for students to consider in their end of the semester project. We intentionally in the fall kept this open-ended, hoping that the students that were interested in this option could possibly initiate a project of their own imagining, or maybe have ideas for their own final products. So as far as the library instruction goes, prior to this session, I worked with the faculty librarian who provided students with considerable technical background pertinent to library and information field. This included an overview of metadata schema, document markup languages, and database functions, which was really helpful when they met for their first face-to-face session with me, because I found I could use a lot of the library technical language and jargon that we tend to avoid in these one-shot sessions. So when they met with me, our session was a bit more traditional. I introduced students to the library catalog and how can they search for rare materials using the different facets. We covered how to read the bibliographic records to determine how to locate information. But we, in this case, went a step further and we looked at technical displays, and we were able to draw the connections between the information the faculty member had lectured about in the previous class and apply it to looking at the technical records and looking at marked fields. Additionally, students were introduced to the physical rare books at this time, and we were able to really have them describe the materials and how it related to the digital information contained in a catalog record to the physical item that they were seeing in front of them. So things naturally developed into a more embedded relationship after that first, initial instruction. The faculty member actually pivoted a little bit, and instead of making this one of many options for students to do for their final project, he decided to treat it as an entire class project due to the interest by the students of the different aspects of the collection. So the second session actually took place in the Digital Humanities lab and included a student-led question and answer session. So this is from the Digital Humanities side of things. I was treated kind of as a client, knowledge expert, and as students probed me about the challenges of special collections librarianship and librarianship in general, and the barriers to making things like the rare books available to researchers. So satisfyingly, the cohort developed an understanding of the delicate balance librarians face when balancing the need to protect fragile materials with a desire to make them available. And from this exercise, students identified 3 realistic, what they call user stories, that inform the overall project design for a digital exhibition and explanatory website for the materials. So by that initial meeting, what we were going to do with the early modern books and the work of librarians was really starting to take shape. And out of that, we decided that we would have 3 teams. We'd have one team dedicated to scanning and digitizing materials. They would be responsible for performing the work of our archival team and scanning materials to best practices, naming files, and preparing files accordingly. We'd have a second team that would be trained on Digital Commons, our institutional repository, that would be responsible for identifying appropriate metadata and catalog records for transferring into Digital Commons, inputting that, creating records. And then our third team would be responsible for creating a public website that would help inform would-be patrons about the early modern book collection. Then COVID happened. So those plans took shape again in February, but unfortunately COVID happened and we really needed to pivot our plans. Obviously, we could no longer have students come on campus and scan rare book materials, which was a considerable portion of this project. So working very closely with faculty, we used the month of March to kind of regroup and rethink. And obviously there were challenges that faculty member was also facing outside of this project as well. So we really took our time developing a plan where this project can be realized. So our revised plan by mid-semester included the following. We had one team that we would consider our Digital Commons team. So they would be responsible for preparing files for submission into our institutional repository. They would input the metadata, submit and revise those records for each of the early books we identified. We then had a website team, which was charged with organizing a public website using LibGuides once again as a platform. They would also be responsible for researching, using library resources to research not only the publisher of the early modern books, but any provenance that we had available in our records. And they were also tasked with identifying libraries with similar holdings. So a little bit of knowledge of WorldCat needed to happen as well. The faculty member also created an ArcGIS team for those who could not work more closely with me directly. They utilized publisher information to create narrative maps, and they also identified libraries with similar projects. So to make this happen, it involved a lot of effort between myself and the faculty member. So we had group Zoom sessions where we trained them on various aspects of these tools, whether it was our Digital Commons, institutional repository, or LibGuides. I also had one-on-one research consultations with the students on these various technical tasks. I had one-on-one research consultations with those charged with researching the library books. So all in all, it developed into a very close relationship with myself, the faculty, and the 7 students that remained enrolled in the class post-COVID, post-early COVID. So working directly with the liaison faculty, I was able to facilitate this experiential learning opportunity where students were actually working with many of the same tools that I use as a librarian and a special collections librarian on a day-to-day basis. They were getting real world, real case scenario of working with commercial institutional repository, publishing software, and a content management system. So excitingly, the deliverables. First, we had a digital exhibition, which is hosted on Digital Commons, which highlighted a single page from each early modern book that we had in our collection. Now, because we could not have students on site, this activity had to be performed by myself. So we did not scan entire books. We just scanned the title page and the cover. But the students input all the data about each object into Digital Commons and made it available. And we have that highlighted here in Digital Commons. Then we have the public website, which included an overview of the library and special collections for their public. And it also went into depth about 3 of the pieces. So the faculty member required them to do some in-depth research about 3 of the pre-1650 books you see there, Lucan, the Greek New Testament we have, and the 1578 Thomas Cooper Thesaurus. So they did extensive research on those 3 pieces, and then they provided information to the public as if they were as if this was representing the library itself. And I put public in quotes because, of course, we actually had this set in a private LibGuide because we didn't want it to replace the existing Special Collections website, but we certainly have used elements of their activities on our own public website since. One of the great things about LibGuides is that we can borrow books and pages from these. And then lastly, there was the ArcGIS story map, which utilized many of the data that we had gathered in Digital Commons through our catalog records, and they were able to create a map. And our future plans for this project is to more fully develop this story map and tell a story about the publishers and the evolution of printing during that time in Western Europe, using our rare materials in our care. So the final thoughts about this project overall was a success from all of the parties involved. I was really fortunate because the faculty member incorporated reflection activities as part of this project all along. So I was able to look at their blog entries to see how they were engaging with me with the content I was teaching at the time, which can be really interesting to see their perspective of what I taught. You gotta have a little bit of humility. So I was able to track their journey as far as when they were coming into the library for one-on-one sessions, when I was going there to meet with them, and then when they were set free for COVID and they were home, they were reflecting on the activities that they were doing. And then they also reflected at the end about why they felt Digital Humanities was important, how they felt the connections of the library, in particular our early modern book collection, why it was important to do activities for this. So I was really able to get an insider view on what the students were thinking about all the aspects of this project. And so I just want to share 2 rather long quotes, I think, that kind of reflect the overall experience from the student perspective. So one student in their blog wrote, "We started this project just before the outbreak of COVID-19 and had to complete our task outside of the classroom away from the library. Needless to say, it was a challenge at first, getting away, everything swapped over to online courses, and having to work from home really put us in a bad spot trying to move this project forward. But we carried on and created something I think we can all be proud to be a part of. A project that will hopefully be able to provide information to students and faculty alike, as well as keep growing and updating long after we have left Georgia Southern." And so most of the students had similar reflection pieces. They all felt that the transition, while difficult, ended up smoothing itself out. And they were really proud to be part of something that can be used and would be seen, that I could use in my own work. And I reiterated that throughout the process, that this wasn't something that would just die off in the semester. This is something that would be continued to be developed with future cohorts and would be accessible to the public in various aspects along the way. And then I also had feedback from a faculty. He generously sent a departmental-wide email to those involved in Digital Humanities and the History Department, explaining the difficulties and the challenges of COVID. And I'm going to, again, read an excerpt from his email here, because then, again, I think it captures how the faculty viewed the success of this project in incorporating librarian work into library instruction and into his program. Quote, "Our classes are not simply a triage exercise right now. Real innovation and real learning is happening across the board in ways that are profound and transformative for the students. Second, like our students who switch from app to app on their phone, successful strategies right now tend to be multi-platform and wherever possible student-driven. Finally, none of these digital projects were done alone." In discussion with another Digital Humanities faculty across the country. I said that the smooth transition for my undergrad class was not luck, it was library. We are starting to work more like scientists do with our multi-authored papers and less like staying to Rome in a study. So again, this was an email that I was copied to his colleague, and I think it's a testament to the fact that much of the work that they would want their students to be performing when they graduate, they can get real-world first-hand training and knowledge by working with the library and performing library work. And for those of us who have dual roles, whether it's government information or special collections, when we're asked to do these traditional library instruction classes, we can kind of sneak in our other aspects of our work and create these more meaningful assignments and projects for our students and for faculty. So what I was able to take away from this, overall, in the short term, it increased awareness of the early modern books collection. I have since had faculty in other areas, including, I believe, philosophy, request use of the early modern books collection in their classes. I have had patrons all the way from England request additional scans of pages that we did not. In this case, the 1578 Thesaurus. It has strengthened the partnership between the library and digital humanities program. This faculty member and faculty in the other part of the program is really interested in other aspects of my colleagues' work and how it might fit within digital humanities. And there's an increased trust, the role that I and that my colleagues, that my librarians can play in designing curriculum and projects like this and delivering that content to their students. And overall, it's just increased interest in doing these experiential projects, using library resources and using library work. Whether it's using a graphic design group to create library promotional materials, an engineering group to design a library map. There's a lot of things that we tend to do in-house, and as librarians, a lot of those other duties as assigned that can have more impact as these student projects. And so I'm very lucky that this faculty member was willing to share that successful experience, even with COVID, with his faculty member, because I already have 2 other projects lined up for the fall, working with liaison faculty with this type of activity. So thank you all for viewing this recording. If you have any questions about this project, any of the nitty-gritty details about how we developed the early modern book digital exhibition or the training involved, please feel free to reach out to me at autumnjohnson@georgiasouthern.edu. Thank you so much.